stuff. Thanks for joining me once again. Settle down, pay attention. We've got a bit to get through today. I've got a few videos to make, all in a row, along the lines of who's wrong on the interwebs. Today, we're dealing with the incredibly ridiculous plant-based news. The video I'm dealing with today is entitled Keto Goes Wrong, Doctors Reveal, wherein they truck out a series of individuals, some of whom are doctors, which, by the way, even if all of them were doctors, and they're not, that would not qualify them to speak on human nutrition, because doctors are not qualified in human nutrition whatsoever. They're qualified in allopathic medicine. Basically, what we have here is a stream of irresponsible, misanthropic, disinformation, propaganda, smoke and mirrors, garbage of the highest order, the sort of thing that should land these particular speakers, frankly, firmly behind bars because of their lies with malice aforethought that they're telling here, most of them. Those that are not telling lies with malice aforethought are probably just that incompetent. They are just that lacking. Either as a reason for these particular individuals to remain silent for all time, and also them speaking and saying such ridiculous stuff is a reason for me to put them straight where they're wrong, which is pretty much fucking everywhere. All right, team, let's crack on with that, shall we? What fun.
So I've seen a handful of patients that have taken on the keto diet craze.
A handful. How many, Gemma? How many have you seen? The keto craze, by the way, is that the craze that human beings began probably about 4.5 million years ago? That crazy fad? That one? Oh, yeah.
And in those patients, I have noticed some emerging patterns.
How many patients have you said a handful, Gemma? How many? And so how do you get an emerging pattern when you have a number of observations which is remarkably low? That doesn't make any sense at all, does it? No.
For those of them that can actually get through the initial symptoms of lethargy and tiredness and nausea.
Those are things that occur in people who change their diet from one thing to any other thing, actually, too rapidly. It's not a good idea. You shouldn't do it. They are not things that are particular to ketogenic lifestyles at all.
Bad breath and constipation and low libido, the so-called keto flu. For those that actually manage to get it through that stage, they do see some short-term benefits. Also
some long-term benefits too. I'm an example of that, Gemma. I've been on a ketogenic way of eating now for about 27 years, give or take. Okay, so that's not really short-term, is it, love? No.
So they'll get some weight loss. They might get better control of their blood glucose.
Both, yes.
And they may even have a reduced lipid profile. And that,
well, that's not necessarily a good thing. Depends on how the profile is made up and what other underlying factors there may or may not be. Results on a blood panel are not informative by themselves, standalone. A competent physician knows that.
That can sometimes reinforce the diet changes for them until they start to run into problems.
Well, I'm 27 years in, Gemma. How long should I wait for these problems to kick in with my ketogenic way of eating? I could talk to my friend Richard Rodriguez, who's been doing it for 39 years. How long should he wait for these problems to kick in? I can point you also to a number of examples of multi-decadal ketogenic way of eating devotees, other than just the two of us, by the way, as well, Gemma. More than a handful. Okay?
One patient in particular who had a rise in his cholesterol levels. And
So what?
His LDL cholesterol, his lipid profiles, even as he was losing weight. And I know that's a really well-documented problem with a lot of low-carb diets.
It's not a problem. Your LDL level is exactly what it ought to be. It's under the control of your genes. Those genes, having survived 3.8 billion years on this planet and probably more like 13.8 billion years in the universe. Okay? It's a process that's led inexorably to the development of those genes. Those genes are really good at what they do, Gemma. They have that under control. No intervention from you is required at all. None.
diets, and he unfortunately had that side effect.
Side effect? No, that's a physiological measurement of lipids in his blood on one occasion, probably. Did you do a repeat series to gauge the repeatability of that? Bet you didn't. And even if you had done, and it was elevated above what you might expect, or the baseline or the normative values, so what? That's not an effect. That's a physiological signal, and it's not a problem.
I also had another patient who just got really fed up with eating so much meat.
Well, bully. I have a lot of clients who get really, really fed up with being unhealthy their whole lives. They find it quite restrictive, Gemma. So they come to me for some advice on how to sort their diet out so that their health comes right, and they thank me for it.
He actually felt quite lacking in energy. And he just, I mean, it is a very restrictive diet. I think
No, it isn't. What's restrictive, Gemma, is living your whole life ill, unwell, and behooving to the NHS, for example. The only thing that would be worse than being behooving to the NHS on the client side, I would say, Gemma, is being behooving to the NHS as a physician or other clinical person. You don't want to be doing that.
He just felt he wanted to try and bring in some more vegetables into his life.
Why? Vegetables are not food for human beings.
So overall, I'd say people have had some short-term results with it.
Yeah, and long-term as well. Remember, 27 years in my case, 39 years in the case of Richard Rodriguez, 22 years or so in the case of Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I think it's 13 or 14 years now for Dr. Sean Baker. I think it's over 20 years for Kelly Hogan. I think it's 15 years or so for Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson. The list goes on and on and on. I don't have time to list everybody that's been doing this multiple decades, but there are plenty of us.
But at the cost of long-term health?
No, not at all. I'm still waiting for any long-term health problems related to the way I've been eating for 27 years, Gemma. When do these problems kick in, love? And what form do they take? Because I'm not noticing any problems of any kind.
And I've seen that time and again. I've looked into studies.
Well, I've seen time and again and looked into more studies than you've had hot feeds in your life, lovely. I'm actually a professor of, among other things, human physiology and human nutrition. So I really have looked into studies a great deal. And what you're about to say is, frankly, vacuous, inane, irresponsible, and laughable. But go on then.
Myself, and I haven't managed to find any long-term benefit from keto in terms of studies.
Have you not? Well, you haven't looked then. And so?
But what I have found is case reports of people with kidney stones and dehydration and
not related to keto, not cause and effect related to keto. That doesn't prove a damn thing. Are you suggesting that nobody who doesn't eat keto has any of those conditions? If so, I think you should probably wakey, smell the coffee. All right, what's next?
Cardiac arrhythmias. And I even found 5 studies that linked true ketogenic diet with death in children who are having to follow it for medical reasons.
Yes, that's a classic one. That one that you're talking about there was the case where the ketogenic diet was used in the case of intractable epilepsy in children, and there were a number of deaths in that cohort. Those deaths, had you bothered to look into this more than 5 seconds just to subserve your need to try and look like you've done some research to underpin your theology, you ridiculous woman, you will have found that the reason for those deaths was traced back to serious heart arrhythmias caused by one of the drugs those children were taking for their intractable epilepsy. Okay, nothing whatever to do with the keto. You ridiculous buffoon. What's next?
So it's definitely not.
I mean, this is the kind of level of propaganda, disinformation, lies, misanthropy you get from these criminal cockmonkeys. This woman should go to prison, and she should do that without a medical license. It should be revoked. This is disgraceful that you would say something like that. I found a case where children died because of keto. No, you didn't, love. They died because of massive arrhythmias caused by the drug they were giving those children. Okay? Goodness me.
Something to take lightly. And as I said to my patients, why would you do this? Why would you carb count and have to do a urine test for keto?
You don't count carbs, you just don't eat any. You also don't have to test for anything. The point of a ketogenic diet is not to have ketones. Ergo, you don't need to measure whether you have ketones. It's called a ketogenic diet because that's one of the side effects of it. The point is not eating carbohydrates. Zero, which requires no measurement of carbohydrates and no measurement of urine for ketones or blood for ketones or anything else, all right? Straightforward. What's next?
Ketones every day, when you can just eat vibrant plant foods and stay...
Plant are not food and neither are they vibrant. Those are value judgment statements. Food for human beings absolutely, unequivocally, demonstrably is the muscle meat and associated fat of large ruminant animals, mostly grass-fed if it's available to you and you can afford it. Simple. Not plants at all.
Stay well and lose weight and have an increased lifespan.
No, there is no evidence to support any of those claims whatsoever extant anywhere in the literature. All lies.
Win-win.
No, nonsense. That's all from Gemma. Obviously, now we're going to talk to Zelda from the Terrahawks about her ideas. All right, Zelda, let's hear them.
The place to start talking about ketogenic diets is to acknowledge that there are a couple of circumstances in which they could actually be helpful.
One, if you're a human being. Two, if you are a human being.
Childhood epilepsy. Very little children often recover from epilepsy using a ketogenic diet. And the other is cancer patients, advanced cancer patients sometimes.
You missed the actual two there, Zelda, which if you're a human being and therefore genetically predisposed, designed and absolutely selected for positively and against negatively things that would inform us otherwise in terms of our genes. We've been doing this for 4.5 million years at least, eating a ketogenic way of getting our nutrition. It's not a fad. It's not useful in limited circumstances. It is the species-appropriate diet for human beings. All right?
Benefit. But the reason why it's so important to stay away from this, unless you fit those particular criteria.
There is no reason you should stay away from a species-appropriate, species-specific diet. I mean, you know, if I was in a position where I was thinking to myself, goodness, is Zelda an example of the kind of person I would like to listen to who can inform me as to what the likelihood is that a certain dietary intervention or a different one is likely to be good for my species, I would probably go, I don't know, boys and girls. Can't mention it, but obviously it's a big white elephant in the room. Would you take advice from Zelda here?
Criteria is that there are dangerous and sometimes
there are no dangers any more than any other way of eating. In fact, a lot less than most ways of eating associated with a species-appropriate, species-specific way of eating. What a ridiculous comment. Are you going to back it up with anything, Zelda?
Life-threatening side effects.
No, there are no life-threatening side effects of eating appropriately for your species. Goodness, this should be funny. Let's hear them, Zelda.
That result from a ketogenic diet.
Result, that's a cause and effect statement. You're going to back it up with anything, like an experiment? No, I thought not. Well, sorry, Zelda. No, absolutely not.
So if you have terminal cancer, you may not mind the side effects too much, but if you are...
What side effects are those?
Not a cancer patient, if you don't have seizures all day long, you really don't qualify for a ketogenic diet.
The qualification for a ketogenic diet, Zelda, is human being. That's your qualification, because that's how your genes are designed. That's what you're supposed to do.
Side effects might bother you a lot. And just a few of them that I'll mention. One is dehydration.
No, it isn't. Not at all. False.
Which is persistent, constant, never goes away.
Nonsense. False. Lie. Going to back it up with anything?
No.
Thought not.
Gastrointestinal complications.
No, in fact, gastrointestinal function improves almost universally. People report the best enteric function that they have throughout their lifespans. Things normalize, bloating goes down, chronic systemic inflammation goes down. Everything is tickety-boo and clockwork in that regard. 27 years I've been doing this, Zelda. Not a problem yet. Richard Rodriguez, 39 years. I've listed a few other. I could be here all day. Rewind the video and check him out. No.
Are really common.
No, they're not, Zelda. That's a lie.
Infectious diseases, pneumonia, hypoglycemia, electrolyte, and sometimes life-threatening electrolyte imbalances.
Absolute nonsense. You're going to back that up with anything whatsoever? Still no? Okay.
Hepatitis, acute pancreatitis, osteopenia, kidney.
Now you're just listing a bunch of things that human beings can suffer. And human beings that undertake all sorts of dietary ways of going about things suffer all of these conditions. There is nothing unique about them to people on a ketogenic lifestyle, and they're not particularly common. This is ridiculous. Absolutely stunningly ridiculous.
Stones.
This is criminal behavior.
Iron deficiency anemia.
Yeah, nonsense.
Cardiomyopathy.
No. Nonsense. You're going to back that up with anything at all.
Develops after 1 month in some ketogenic diet.
Absolute nonsense. This is just rubbish, all of it. Notice how there is nothing being cited here that shows cause and effect, anything of the sort of what Zelda's talking about here.
Patients. And so these are risks that might be worth taking.
No, they're not risks at all. False. None of these things have been causally linked to any form of diet, actually, of any kind. That would take an experiment. Do you have an experiment, Zelda? We'll wait. We actually won't wait because we've got other things to do, haven't we, boys and girls? So let's do those things.
If something, if you really stood to benefit from the diet, but
you really do, because it's a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, and the benefits are enormous. And patent, actually, Zelda. Perhaps at any stage, if you want to join the human race, come over and join us and see what's happening over here. Actually, open those eyes. But you might be able to see what's going on.
If you do not meet those categories, it is a terrible idea because it's all risk and no benefit whatsoever.
Absolute nonsense. Complete garbage. Not a single word of truth there at all. And certainly nothing, absolutely nothing underpinned by any science of any kind. No.
Lots of side effects, no benefit.
You said that and it was false the first time you said it. It was a lie the first time and it's still a lie now. Are you going to say anything that's not a lie, Zelda?
On the other hand, when people eat a diet based on whole foods, a plant-based, low-fat...
Okay, well, whole foods do not include plants for human beings because human beings are designed to eat the flesh and fat of animals and not plants. So whole foods, plant-based, is an oxymoron, Zelda.
High-fiber diet.
Fiber is contraindicated in the human diet, Zelda. Check it out. You'll learn something.
The only side effect is you're inclined to lose weight, your skin...
Are you, Zelda? How much? Is there an optimal level of weight that a human being should be able to maintain, perhaps? Don't know. Well, actually, I do know, but you know how it is. I'm mentioning such things on the YouTubes. I'll just leave it out there. There is an ideal weight range for humans, and it's possible for any given human being to be either over or under that ideal range. And I think you'll find that if you look at people that eat nothing but plants, you'll find that almost universally they fall on the underweight side of that range. Okay? That's almost as if they're destitute of some kind of major macronutrient or something, as well as a whole bunch of micronutrients as well, perhaps. Well, not perhaps, they are demonstrably, unequivocally, absolutely. That's a fact. That can be sorted with actual science, Zelda.
Clears up, your hair looks better.
Does it? Does it? Perhaps I shouldn't cast too many aspersions as far as hair goes. We'll leave that one there. Does it, Zelda? Your hair looks better. Okay.
Your diabetes goes away.
It also goes away if you eat an entirely meat and fat-based diet as well, Zelda. The thing that causes diabetes is mixing fats and carbohydrates together in the diet significantly. That's the cause of, if you're talking type 2 diabetes, the sort that generally tends to go away if you treat it correctly. So a diet which is lacking in either one of those major macronutrients, so-called, will alleviate that problem. So either a very low-fat diet or a very low-carbohydrate diet will achieve the same thing with regards to type 2 diabetes. One of those diets, however, is destitute of nutrient, as I've already outlined and described, I think, more than adequately, and the other one is not. So one of those diets enjoys people such as myself who have been doing it for multiple decades without a health problem, and one of them is a diet that 84% of people who ever try it quit. They do that within 5 years, and 90% of those people cite catastrophic health failure born of nutrient deficiency as their reason for doing so, Zelda. Okay? Check it out. You might learn something. I doubt it, though, because I don't think you're actually interested in learning a damn thing. I think you're interested in propagandizing, misleading, and frankly, anyone that would follow you deserves what they get, actually.
Your cardiovascular disease begins to regress. Your cholesterol
No, false.
drops. Your blood
Cholesterol dropping is contraindicated. That's a bad thing, Zelda.
pressure becomes better.
Blood pressure also becomes better when you remove carbohydrates entirely as well.
Some side effects I think most people are pretty interested in. You sleep better. Your energy improves.
All things that also happen on a ketogenic way of living, if you do it right. By the way, you can't do it wrong. Otherwise, you have to hand in your ketogenic card and be pointed at and laughed and publicly named and shamed and told that you did it wrong, of course. There are some basic things you need to get right, like not eating keto junk food, like not including any plants at all, because plants are not food for human beings. In other words, go carnivore is the correct form of ketogenic diet for human beings, actually.
Athleticism improves.
No, athleticism improves in plant-based eaters, does it, Zelda? No, it doesn't. False.
So you compare the side effects of the whole foods plant-based diet with
Again, whole foods and plant-based are oxymoron. They are not words that should go together.
the side effects of the ketogenic diet.
You haven't named any that are cause and effect linked to the diet, Zelda. None at all. You've just given us your ideology. Let's move on, shall we?
And I think every time the whole foods plant-based
no, we've covered that.
diet wins out.
No, it doesn't. And what you think, well, you don't think, Zelda. You just mindlessly espouse the accepted narrative from the Church of Anorexia Vegana is what you do. Think is several levels of operation above your capacity, actually. What's next?
Let's face it, which would you rather have?
I would rather have health by eating a diet indicated for me in terms of my organ systems, my metabolic pathways, my genetic gift of at least 4.5 million years of history doing exactly the same kind of diet. I'm pretty happy doing what I'm doing.
Intestinal complications.
I don't have gastrointestinal complications, Zelda. You'll find that they're very, very common in people who attempt to feed themselves food like slop derived from plants, actually. You'll find that's where the gastrointestinal complications come from. In fact, if you're interested in facts at all, I know you're not, but that's what they are.
Kidney stones?
No, no kidney stones either.
Or better energy.
By the way, kidney stones are calcium oxalate, Zelda. Where do you get oxalate from in your diet? Oh, yes, that's right. plants. Goodness me. Goodness me.
Clear skin, beautiful hair.
Really, how long do you have to be on this so-called whole foods, so-called plant-based diet to get any of those things, Zelda? When does this clear skin and good-looking hair kick in? And do you get a mirror when you join the Church of Anorexia Vegana, or is it a mirror on the wall situation? Does the mirror lie to you? Is that what happens? Zelda, you are the fairest in the land, it says, does it? Oh, okay.
And weight loss and
yes, we can gather that. We've covered weight loss and there being an optimal range, yes.
Reverse some of your diseases.
No, there is no evidence that a plant-based diet can reverse any condition whatsoever. There is none extant anywhere in the literature on that. That's also a lie.
I don't think that many people would have to debate very long about that.
Yeah, so the keto diet.
All right, so we go straight from Zelda from the Terrahawks to Garth, the goat lover Davis. He likes a goat, does Garth, apparently. Anyway, goatee boy, what have you got to say? This is the boy who gave us such classics as Proteinaholic, and he wrote a whole book about how we should avoid eating protein, the very thing that makes up 65% of our dry mass. Also, this is a bariatric surgeon and not qualified remotely in nutrition at all. Neither is Zelda from the Terrahawks qualified in nutrition at all. Neither is the first speaker, Gemma, an MD. She is. We're yet to actually hear from a nutrition expert, except for myself, of course, which you've heard from since the beginning. I'm here all week. Right. Goodness me. Thank you. Right, goatee boy.
Correctly done is not a high protein diet.
There we go. See, this is the boy who tells us to avoid protein.
That's where keto people mess up big time. So the people that are doing the research on keto diets mainly want their patients eating a very high fat diet. Still higher protein than I would want, but...
Yeah, but Garth, you have no basis whatever to speak about human nutrition. You're a gastric surgeon. Go and do that, son.
Nowadays, I just got back from a conference.
Anyone that's interested, I've dealt with Garth in the past, face to face, on one occasion at least. He was going to engage in a series of discussions with me, but ratted out and ran away with shit in his pants after the first one because he realised he was going to get carved to pieces by an actual qualified, experienced, scientifically minded individual, i.e., yours truly, this bad bald man. Yeah, it's a laugh if you want to check it out. It really is. It's just not the first clue about anything at all.
I was looking at the latest literature, and they're really trying to steer clear of steak, red meat, processed meat.
Yeah, all of that's bought and paid for, though, Garth. None of that's science, is it? Are any of those experiments with human beings? No. Not science then, are they?
And they're really trying to get at lots of fats.
So right now, ketogenic...
That's it from Goatee Boy. Perhaps he had to rush off and find another goat. Thanks, though, Garth, for your input. Right, now, who on earth is this little pixie?
Diets are very, very popular, right? As you know, in lots of magazines, and dietitians and nutritionists are suggesting the ketogenic diet, but I have lots of patients who wanted...
Dr. Julie Chan, NDRAC, NES practitioner. Okay, so she's a naturopath. So not qualified in nutrition. RAC, not sure what that stands for. It's probably some kind of counselling postgraduate certificate in some form of counselling, probably not in nutrition. And NES, no idea what that is even. It doesn't really matter. I just thought I'd do a quick analysis of the credentials of these people who claim to be nutrition experts, not one of whom is anything of the sort, actually. Perhaps, Julie, you should give us a list of your peer-reviewed publications as first investigator, first author, looking into aspects of human nutrition at all. Shall we wait around for that? No. Bloody thing. Right, carry on.
Try it and are on it, and they come to me and they are asking questions about it, right? So this is a very important topic. So what a ketogenic diet, so maybe I'll explain a little bit, is a high-fat, moderate-protein, low-carb diet. It's sort of like a little spin-off from the paleo, except it's...
No, it's not at all, actually. Humans have been eating high-fat, moderate-protein, low-carbohydrate, well, humans for 350,000 years, our entire period of time on this planet, except for the last 10,000 or so where we've gone completely off the rails. And for about 4.5 million years before that as well. Okay, so the very first thing you have to say about it, you haven't actually done your research on at all.
Very high fat, so majority of the calories should come from...
Calories are heat. People don't derive heat from food. People do produce heat by oxidizing the food that they consume. Absolutely. But we don't consume heat and use heat for metabolic process. We don't derive calories from food. That's nonsense. You haven't done any study into first principles, basic physics, or thermodynamics even. Otherwise, you'd understand that. Oh dear.
From fat. And the whole idea is to force the body into ketosis.
It's not forcing your body to do anything. Your body's happy to do it. It has a pathway designed specifically for that purpose. The very thing that's evolved over 4.5 million years at least to do exactly that. It's not a problem. And you're not forcing it to do something it doesn't want to do. It's quite happy to.
Which is a fat burning stage. And I mean, the concept may make sense in some ways.
Well, it does if you actually do any research into it whatsoever. If you actually understand human physiology at all, human nutrition and human nutrition requirements at all, then it doesn't only seem to make sense, it absolutely does make sense. Okay?
But it's problematic when someone starts doing it for a very long time.
No, it isn't. False. Absolutely false. I've covered that already in this video.
Just what I start seeing in people. I mean, sometimes people will try it for 2-3 weeks just to kind of get things under control, but we're talking about patients who are on it for months and months.
How about years and years and years? Hello?
And as we know, a high-fat diet is not a good idea.
No, we don't know any such thing. That is false. That is an ideology on your part that is not supported by science whatsoever. No, wrong.
I mean, every study shows that a low-fat diet is the best diet for...
No, that's false. There are no studies that show any such thing, let alone every study. You're now also implying that all the studies agree with each other, which they don't. And there are no studies that inform on cause and effect on any aspect of human nutrition and heart health outcomes of any kind. False. Lie.
Treating chronic disease. So you can potentially put your body into a very inflammatory state.
No, in fact, the ketogenic way of eating is the least inflammatory diet possible for a human being precisely because it is the appropriate species-specific approach to nutrition. Goodness me, where do you get these ridiculous buffoons from, Klaus, baby? Where do you get these idiots from? What makes you think any of these people are remotely credible, let alone qualified to speak on human nutrition or human physiology or science or anything remotely similar to that? This is absolutely beyond a joke, son. What's next?
Right. And often people are not choosing the right fat. So when they're on a keto...
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go out on a limb and put any amount of money down on a bet that you're going to get this completely fucking wrong, love. Go on then.
Ketogenic diet, I've seen people use butter, which is all saturated fats.
Yep. Where do you think we've gained the vast majority of our heat units for 4.5 million years, love? Our actual effective energy is what I'm referring to there. Our actual chemical energy. Well, it's largely animal fat, which has a significant proportion of saturates in it, doesn't it? There is also no evidence extant anywhere in the literature whatsoever which can link saturated fat causally with any health problem, either short, medium, or long term. Anywhere. None at all. Not one. Anybody who wants to debate me on this topic is welcome to send me an email. I will send you my calendar link. We can book it in, and we will do that live on camera any day of the week or twice on Sundays. I will tear you to pieces. I'm an actual expert in this field. There is no scientific evidence to support that ridiculous ideology. It's nonsense. What's next?
Right? And they think they can
No, wrong.
as much meat with the fat as possible because they think, oh, the fat is good. So they're not trimming the fats off their meats now.
Fat is good. You should not trim it off.
Right? Which is not a good idea.
Wrong, lovey. Completely fucking wrong. Vacuous. Ignorant in the extreme.
Now, if you flip it around and you use a plant-based ketogenic diet,
What's left then? Pretty much nothing but fiber. Which, by the way, the only way a human being can use fiber in any way to derive energy for metabolic process is via the faculty of having a very small amount of bacteria in our colons that allow us to ferment a very small amount of fiber and produce as a byproduct, oh yes, short chain fatty acids that are 100% saturated. Wow. The ignorance is incredible here, isn't it? The Dunning-Kruger is incredible. Goodness me. Perhaps you should go and do your homework.
can actually be potentially quite healthy because we are increasing things like nuts and seeds.
That's not healthy. They're full of lectins, other toxic issues. Often mold toxin issues are associated with that as well. Completely contraindicated for human beings, not food for humans, no.
Coconut oil, olive oil, avocados.
All of those are plant-based things, none of which are food. Oils are contraindicated absolutely in the human diet. There is no place in the human diet for oil of any kind. Extracted, refined oil. Absolutely not. No.
Which generally are very low in a lot of people's diets. So if you ask a general person, what do they eat? They never eat seeds. They never eat nuts. They don't eat avocado.
That's because none of those things are food for human beings. That's why a lot of people don't do them. People's instincts are generally pretty good, actually, until they have that beaten out of them and get brainwashed and told a bunch of vacuous, ridiculous, false misinformation by criminally misanthropic ass monkeys like you. Incredible.
Right? So we were actually incorporating healthy fats into their diet.
But you don't know what those are, love. You've just mentioned a whole bunch of fats that are anything but healthy, as if they were the healthy ones, and you've demonized the one that absolutely is healthy and suggested that it's unhealthy. You've also suggested that all the studies support you on this when fucking none of them do, not one. Not a single one. Incredible.
And so there's different ways of doing the ketogenic diet, but the one where they're doing high fat, high meat diets is definitely not a healthy way.
False. That's your opinion. It's wrong. There is nothing underpinning your opinion. It's vacuous. It's just noise. It's not of utility to anybody, and you have no credentials that would back you up as an expert in nutrition. None at all. What's next?
So I have seen patients that...
Oh, my God. This is a woman called Belendo, and she really is one of the most arrogant, ignorant young people running around in this space, misinforming people. This is a person with no real credentials, again, in human nutrition or human physiology. This is a person who is a cardiologist of basically no experience to speak of because she is so young, frankly, who has made herself popular in the media through apparently not being too hard to look at. I wouldn't know, and I'm not allowed to comment on such things. Anyway, rather than on actually having anything of any value or correctness to say, I've dealt with this particular individual before, and you'll probably find that on my other video sharing platform offerings. But let's deal with Belindo here again.
Have used the ketogenic diet, and it's very interesting because I think prior to becoming a physician, I didn't know much about the ketogenic diet.
And that hasn't changed since becoming a physician. You still clearly don't know a damn thing about it. Good.
And then one of the most notable cases that I remember was a patient that was in his early 40s, and he was quite healthy on the outside, and he was rushed into the hospital with an emergency heart attack.
So N equals 1, yeah.
He had a STEMI, which is the bad kind of heart attack. And I remember seeing him in the cardiac ICU.
As opposed to those other heart attacks that are a delight and something that we should strive towards. Belindo, is that what you're talking about there? Good. The bad heart attack.
Next day, after they'd found and fixed a blockage in one of his coronary arteries, and on the outside, he was the picture of health. And
you said that already. What you will find when you've actually had more than 5 minutes experience as a cardiologist, love, is that usually the first symptom of a cardiac disease that is apparent on any individual is their first myocardial infarction, love. Often they do appear very healthy. What is your point?
And once discussing with him, I found out that he had been on the ketogenic diet for over 10 years.
Yeah, and? So, there are no other factors other than diet whatsoever that can lead a person to be in a situation where they will develop atherosclerosis. Also, what kind of ketogenic diet was this individual on for over 10 years? Did you get that information? Also, write this down, Danielle Belindo. People tell lies about what they've been eating. Okay? How do you know that this person was in fact doing what he told you he had been doing? You don't. Okay?
The keto diet.
That's it from Belindo? That's it? I had one patient that had a heart attack once, and he told me he'd been on a keto diet, and I believed him. Bang the gavel, case dismissed. Goodness gracious. Right, who's this knob?
By itself is represented, as I said, by a high protein, a high fat, and a low carbohydrate.
No, it's not high protein at all. It's moderate protein if it's done correctly.
Context. Now, this is a context that's been around since the 60s. Atkins came out with it.
No, it's been around, in fact, for 4.5 million years at least. Okay? So the very first thing you have to say about the diet, completely false. So it's not looking good. Also, general practitioner. An allopathic medico. Not an expert in nutrition or physiology or the requirements nutritionally for human. An allopathic physician, a general practitioner. And also, obviously, a very, very arrogant individual with very, very serious Dunning-Kruger. Good?
South Beach, the Florida diet. Any new kid on the block that proved to be the new diet is somewhere revolving around the constellation of a keto diet.
Which has been around for 4.5 million years at least. Good, okay.
So the keto diet science is represented generally by the fact that it's a starvation program.
It's nothing of the sort. It's not even remotely similar to starvation. False. Nonsense. Absolute garbage. Oh my God, these people are incredible, aren't they, boys and girls? Just fucking incredible.
It's a non-sustainable program.
27 years in my case, 39 years in the case of Richard Rodriguez. That's pretty sustainable, isn't it? It's not just N equals 2. We've covered that earlier in the video. Rewind it and have a look through it. It is absolutely sustainable. What's next?
The patients that I've seen who have come to me on the keto diet have come to me with claims of losing weight, which is correct.
You've got to better put a stop to that. You don't want your patients who are overweight becoming weight normalized. That's not okay.
We know why they lose weight.
Yes, because it's indicated and in line with the genetic gift those people have as human beings.
We know they lose weight because of starvation.
No, not at all. They're not starving. Absolute nonsense of the highest order. Garbage.
But they start to feel fatigued. They start to feel run down.
No, they don't at all. No.
They start to have issues with absorption of some of the micronutrients.
No, we don't. False.
They necessarily would have no issue with. It's not.
I have no issue with any of those things. 27 years. I think we're done on that.
Not a sustainable diet.
It is. You said that before. It was wrong the first time. It's still wrong now. It is absolutely sustainable.
And I've seen some people who have gone on a say high bacon and a low carbohydrate diet.
Well, that's ridiculous. You don't want to do that.
Do really, really poorly.
Well, yeah, because you don't want to base your diet on bacon.
Their liver enzymes start to strain.
Because a diet based on bacon is not a good idea. That's got nothing to do with ketogenic diets. Idiot.
Their body starts to fatigue. And it's simply a matter of diverting them back to that wonderful whole foods plant-based
No,
diet.
there you go again. Whole foods plant-based. That's an oxymoron. Unlike you, where we can just drop the oxy part. Okay, what's next?
The diet that revolves around fresh fruit, vegetables, the corn, potatoes, the starchy foods.
None of those things are food for human beings, demonstrably. Absolutely, unequivocally. The actual science tells us that. Perhaps you should do a search and find it. The search terms you might want to use are trophic level, human being, and stable isotope testing. You'll find the answer to the question as to whether or not those things are food for human beings. Okay, the answer is no, they're not.
The lentils and beans, which are high in protein. But
To tell you what's high in protein, meat. Okay, good.
they're derived from the ground. And so naturally they're...
So is meat. We all live on planet Earth. Everything's derived from the ground, the air, the water, the sunlight. It's all natural stuff. Some of it is food for human beings because, like every other animal that's ever existed, we too have evolved in a specialist niche in terms of gaining our nutrition. We are hypercarnivores. That has been established, as I've just outlined, by the testing of the collagen derived from the long bones of human remains of all ages, right back to the very earliest that we can possibly find, and irrespective of where on the planet they were found, those remains, they all agree within a 5% band. Hypercarnivore, that's what we are. We're done. Sorry about that, with the facts again and the actual science.
They're going to be high in those micronutrients.
So is meat. It has everything we need in it. Meat and fat has everything we need in pretty much the right proportions. That is meat in its natural state, not cured meats like bacon so much. You can have some bacon. I'm not saying don't ever eat bacon. I'm just saying don't base your diet on bacon alone. That's a bad idea.
metals like
That's the nitrates and the sugar and stuff that they often, and the salts, the level of salts that they use in bacon, that can be a problem. It's not the bacon itself. Okay?
calcium and zinc and phosphorus.
Yeah, all things that are found in perfectly viable, workable amounts in the muscle meat of animals. I'm an example, 27 years, no deficiencies of any kind. Okay?
Magnesium. These are the these little micronutrients constitute building blocks of the cell and building blocks.
No, they don't. Building blocks of the cell are amino acids, free fatty acids, largely. These minerals that you're talking about are cofactors to one or two of these kind of things, a lot of them, in fact, but they are not the building blocks. False.
Blocks of proteins and building blocks.
Also, the RDIs for all of those micronutrients that you've mentioned there are all vastly inflated above what is actually required and indicated in human beings. Of course, they all assume that you're eating a standard Western or American diet, which would be rich in plant materials and thus require you to need a much higher intake of all of those things, precisely because of the effect of eating plant material on blockading your ability to absorb and utilize those things, for example. Again, if you actually did more than 5 minutes research or had more than 5 minutes engagement with any training in actual physiology and nutrition, you'd understand this. You'd also understand that as an allopathic physician, you have no business talking to a public audience about nutrition. It's not your area of training or expertise at all. What's next?
Of some of the larger parts of our body. They're so essential, and it all comes from the ground. So the whole
Yes, that's where animals get it from too. And then we eat those animals. It's incredible how that works, isn't it?
foods diet itself is a very fresh way of looking at how we revitalize our health.
It's nonsense. It's false. All right, and that's all you had, was it? Okay, good. Who's next? Goodness me, another clear example, another clear paragon of someone who absolutely we should pay attention to and take her advice on all aspects of health immediately. Clearly, we should do that. Please do give us that advice.
So I usually see patients after a keto diet has failed them, so they've lost a little.
No, after they've failed to do it correctly, you mean, and have done something silly that's led them to a health problem. Gosh, I've never heard of anyone who's tried to eat nothing but plants having a health problem. Have you? I'm here all week.
A bit of weight, and maybe their blood sugar has improved a little bit, but
Both tragic things. We don't want people losing weight or getting control of their blood sugar.
then they either gain all the weight back, or worse, I've actually recently seen.
All right, so the first person on here who is so-called nominally qualified in nutrition, however, she's a registered dietitian, which means that in fact she's received no training whatsoever in actual physiology or human nutritional requirements. What she's received is a program of indoctrination from the Dietetics Association of America, not based in science at all. Not based in anything but ideology, theology, and the almighty greenback dollar, actually. I've covered that many times in the past, and I'll probably cover it many times again in the future. No time or inclination to do it today. But anyway, Lee Crosby, let's hear what you've got to say and see if it actually holds any water. Spoiler, it won't.
Someone who gained it back plus. So
Right, so everyone who ever went keto put all the weight back on, did they, Lee? That's what happens every time, is it? No, it isn't.
I'm usually there for them to sort of help them get their health back together versus just getting.
Yes, because obviously, as I said when you first came up on the screen, obviously you'd be someone who we should pay attention to and follow the lead of for health.
Little short-term outcomes. So in terms of ketogenic diets versus whole food plant-based diets?
Again, no. Whole food plant-based is a buzz term. Remember, plants are not food for human beings, let alone whole food. If anything, plants are demonstrably lacking in nutrients, destitute in nutrients for human beings. Whole food. Goodness me, whole food is the muscle meat and associated fat of mostly large ruminant animals in its natural state, fresh. Okay.
Ketogenic diets have a lot of serious risks associated with
No, they don't. Not one. False. Absolutely, fundamentally false. Wrong.
them. So the biggest one being that we know for a fact that low-carb diets are linked to a higher risk of all-cause mortality.
No. False. Risk is a cause and effect statement. It requires experiments. And when you're talking about people's lifespans, that would be experiments on people kept under lock and key in a laboratory situation under proper observation and control for their entire lifespans. Do you have any studies that do that? Lee Crosby, RD? Well, shall we wait for you to produce such a study? You and I both know it does not exist, and you are lying. No. There are no studies informing on the risk of any hard outcome in human beings as that relates to any aspect of human nutrition whatsoever. All you have is associative, poorly controlled, naturalistic observations, in fact entirely uncontrolled naturalistic observations on free-living people That is not science. That does not provide us with any facts whatsoever, none at all. So to say we know absolutely for a fact is absolutely false. The only thing that shows us for a fact, Lee Crosby, is that you don't know the difference between your elbow and your asshole if I'd labelled both of those and taught you how to read. Neither are you a competent scientist. What you are is an indoctrinated puppet of the American Dietetics Association. And you're a fool of the highest order. You're an imbecile. What's next?
Which is basically dying from any cause. And the most extreme form of a low-carb diet is a ketogenic diet. So there's that.
No, it isn't. False again.
That when most people eat a keto diet, they actually are increasing their intake.
What does that even mean? The most extreme form. That's a value judgment statement. The most extreme form of any kind of restrictive diet is fasting. Okay, not ketogenic diets. So false.
Take of things like red meat and processed meat, which we know is linked to colon cancer.
No, false again. Red meat and processed meat have very, very different, even associations with cancer outcomes in certain populations, not in the general population. There are no studies looking at a generalized population on this topic, none at all. They are all aged populations that are looked at, as an aged at the outset. They are not properly controlled. They are not controlled at all, in fact. They are not adequately randomized. They are not genetically identical pairs of twins separated at birth, treated absolutely the same for every aspect of their lives, up to the point where they're going to start following these people. These are confounded, nonsensical, anti-scientific claptrap. These are not studies that can inform us on anyone's individual likelihood of any kind of outcome whatsoever as it relates to any aspect of nutrition. And in fact, the outcome statistics shown by such ridiculous anti-science papers are so close to zero as makes no odds anyway for any one given living human being over a 100-year lifespan. Just nonsense, just ridiculous. Absolute, utter claptrap.
And then this is really scary. So for women of reproductive age, the risk of having a baby with a severe birth defect, these are neural tube defects.
No, again with the risk. Show me some experiments to underpin a claim of risk. The kind of defects you're talking about tend to occur if there is an effective folate deficiency is the most common thing. The second most common reason is women who are having children at a more advanced age than they have in previous generations. They are the associations that seem to bear out. Neither age nor folate status is necessarily connected in any way, shape, or form to a ketogenic diet. Okay, let's move on.
And the two that they were looking at specifically were spina bifida and anencephaly, which is being born basically with very little brain tissue and very little skull. So
there are one or two people floating around in the world that seem to be suffering from very little brain tissue, don't they, Lee Crosby? RD.
It's not a survivable birth defect. Is that the risk of having one of those birth defects?
No, again with the word risk, totally inappropriate. There are no studies informing on risk.
Is 30% higher if the mom is on a...
30% higher than what? What is the baseline incidence? No? You don't even know? How about you keep your ignorant mouth shut then until you actually know what you're talking about?
Low-carb style diet when she is...
What is a low-carb style diet? How is that defined? And who decides who is on one and who isn't? And how is it cross-checked for validity, veracity, correctness, and truth? How's that done? Shall we wait? Goodness me.
Pregnant. And the scary thing is those defects happen early in pregnancy before a lot of women even know they're pregnant. So it's a concern.
What does that have to do with anyone's choice of nutritional program? Nothing whatsoever. It's true either way.
Because women who might be following these diets and get pregnant really could put the put the fetus at risk.
No, there you go, making a cause and effect statement linking a dietary practice to the likelihood of an outcome. There are no studies to underpin that claim. They do not exist. You are an incompetent charlatan. You are a silly, ridiculous, clearly, obviously, patently healthy individual.
There's no question there.
That's it? Again? And here's someone starting with, there's no question. There's always a question. The fact that this discussion continues points directly to the fact that there is a question. And here is another example of well, should we point once again to there being an ideal weight range?
Remains a lot of controversy about a lot of the diets that are out there. So we hear a lot about the paleo diet, about the ketogenic diets, where people are really consuming.
So another MD with no training at all in human nutrition. Klaus, son, you've got to wake up to yourself here. This is, all you're doing is making yourself even less credible, sunshine. Absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous propaganda. Just nonsense. What's next?
Very high amounts of animal protein. But there really are data that are lacking to suggest that that can have any kind of positive impact on.
Or indeed negative. There is no data to inform either way. That's the actual balanced, correct statement to make about the state of the empirical evidence available on any aspect of heart health outcomes and dietary intervention in human beings of any kind. So let's be honest, shall we? There is no data.
On your lipid profile.
Lipid profiles are meaningless and worthless and do not inform on anything.
Or your risk of developing.
No, not risk. Again, with the word risk. Hear this word risk they like throwing around? There are no studies informing on risk. Are you okay, love? Struggling at all, perhaps? I don't know.
Heart disease. In fact, I mean, it's anecdotal, but
again, say in fact. And that makes you much more credible if you say in fact before saying something. And what you're now going to say, in fact, is you're going to tell us an anecdote. In fact. Off you go.
Had several patients that have actually been.
Several patients. How many?
Hospitalized recently.
How many?
With heart attacks.
Yeah. Many medical practitioners have patients that have heart attacks because many people have heart attacks precisely because many people take the false and contraindicated disinformation and poor advice of the so-called authorities in this field and believe them, despite the fact that public health statistics are quite clear on this and show every reason under the sun why you should ignore that advice entirely.
Who have adopted those types of changes. And now
right. So now you want to blame someone's heart attack on a diet they may have changed to in the last few years or few months or few weeks in many cases. Heart disease, heart attacks develop over decades. Decades and decades. What's your point here besides no point at all?
Now have come to regret it. Of course, those are just small numbers, but even the larger scale studies at this point.
There are no larger scale studies on this topic. There are no cause and effect studies on human beings on any aspect of health and any aspect of nutrition. They do not exist.
Don't really support the concept that by taking in more animal protein that you can reduce your risk of developing a cardiovascular event.
Or increase it. Either. There is no data to inform on risk. I think I've covered that more than adequately. There is no risk-related data at all.
If anything, it's the reverse.
No, it isn't. It's nothing of the sort. That is a lie. That is a misrepresentation of the science. There is no data on risk either way.
Now,
Back to this clown again. You said nothing of any correctness or value the first time. Why would you get 2 bites at the cherry?
Does is that the body will then break down all the excess fat that we have, as well as utilize the fat and the protein that is consumed in the diet.
Goodness me, that's tragic. We don't want that happening, surely.
It does this to survive. Now,
yes, that's how the body is designed. It's designed to survive.
body principally will fuel itself from sugar.
No. Unless you feed yourself with a bunch of exogenous sugar, in which case it will use that first precisely to clear it because it's toxic, you buffoon.
It takes that sugar, it breaks up all the bonds between the sugar molecules and within the sugar
No, it doesn't actually.
molecule, and that energy that gets released when those bonds are broken is converted to chemical energy within the cell. That's principally how cellular metabolism and respiration work.
The exact same analogy, although it's not quite correct, as I alluded to, the exact same analogy could be applied to exactly how energy is derived from oxidizing fats, you buffoon. There's no difference. It's basically the same process. It's exactly the same cycle that the reducing equivalents cleaved off our food molecules goes through. It's exactly the same mitochondrial chain after that. What on earth are you talking about here?
And the byproduct of that is water and carbon dioxide.
That's also true for oxidizing fats as well.
Which
and so, again, no difference.
We excrete. So when the body doesn't have free sugar, it uses fat and protein and it breaks them all up, particularly the fat.
Mostly fat, yes.
And uses the energy in the fat molecule.
Yes. That's how it's supposed to be.
And we get a byproduct called ketones.
No, not necessarily at all. That depends on your blood sugar level, which is under the control of another process called gluconeogenesis, which is controlled largely by the endocrine hormone system and some chemoreceptors that sense the level in your blood and also gauge on your needs for sugar for things like brain activity and muscle contraction and creates what's required. What is your point?
The body goes into ketosis.
Yes.
And this is the circumstances by which keto diets principally work.
No, it isn't. It's a side effect of keto diets. It's got nothing to do with how they work. False.
That they burn all the excess fat.
No, we don't burn anything at all. We oxidize things in a controlled fashion in order to derive energy to produce ATP. It's not burning.
Now, yes, you get incredible weight loss and you get it fairly quickly. And
yeah, we don't want that. Goodness, that's dreadful. We can't have that.
Know the science behind why that.
Oh, the science. Tell us about the science, son. Off you go.
Happen. And there is some argument that the pro-keto people will use that you see people do better when they're on keto diets, and here's the proof. The reality is they probably do better because their weight loss comes down, their weight comes down. So when people lose weight...
No, false. That's part of it, but it's not the only reason. The other reason that people on sensibly designed ketogenic diets not containing plant material do so very well is because they've stopped poisoning themselves with contraindicated plant toxins, anti-nutrients, pro-inflammatory substances that you will absolutely find in plant materials, for example. That's pretty important too.
Of course, they're going to have more mobility. Their sugars are going to be better. Their diabetic profile will look better.
These are all good reasons to avoid the keto diet, aren't they, buffoon? My God.
And to some extent, their energy levels may be slightly elevated because of the excess ketones in the body. But this only lasts for a very short period of time.
Well, again, 27 years.
Know that from long-term studies, when patients...
There are no long-term studies on hard health outcomes as it relates to any aspect of human nutrition in human beings. These do not exist anywhere in the literature. Wakey, wakey.
Follow the keto diet. They irrespectively, without realizing it, will push themselves into states of disease.
No, false. There are no studies that show cause and effect that a ketogenic diet or any other kind of diet will push anybody into disease at all. False.
Cardiovascular disease?
No, absolute lie. There are no data to underpin that claim extant anywhere in the literature. None at all.
Been the number one thing that we worry about.
Well, worrying about something doesn't mean that that's a valid worry. It isn't.
This is because the animal proteins themselves, contain a very high concentration of choline. And choline gets metabolized in the stomach and then gets fixed in the liver to a product called trimethylamine oxide.
Yes, and then there's another species of bacteria that live with us that develop in humans who have been eating a strictly carnivorous diet for any reasonable period of time, which eats that TMAO, thus clearing it away, and they excrete a harmless byproduct. Problem solved. This is a hypothetical problem. This is a theoretical problem. It's not an actual problem. And again, there are no data to underpin a cause and effect relationship, let alone a meaningful or convincing even association between ketogenic diets and any health outcome of any kind. You buffoon.
And trimethylamine oxide goes around the body.
Only if it's not eaten by that other speciation of bacteria that eat it all up. Yum, yum, yum. What you'll find is that when you take people from a Western standard diet and you quickly change them overnight to a carnivore diet and you follow their TMAO levels in their blood for a couple of weeks, you'll find that they'll go up. That's no shock. We're not surprised at that. Follow those people under control and observation for 6 months, and you'll find that there is no problem with elevated TMAO in those people at that stage at all. None. We're done here with TMAO. We're finished with TMAO. This is not an issue in carnivorous human beings.
And induces inflammation. It
Nonsense.
drives the pathways of stroke.
I tell you what drives the pathways of inflammation, buffhead. It's chronic activation of the Randall cycle. It's chronic intake of pro-inflammatory plant-based toxins, anti-nutrients, etc. That's what drives inflammation. It's inappropriate activation of our immune systems in a dysfunctional fashion, as mediated by the intake of the very substances I've just alluded to. That's the problem here. Not consuming the very thing that human beings have based their nutrition on for 4.5 million fucking years. You absolute cock monkey. Goodness me.
Of hypertension, of vascular disease. So the keto diet itself has the science behind it to lose weight quickly.
And as the species-appropriate, species-specific diet of human beings, if it's done correctly, i.e. 100% carnivore, no plant material at all, that also has the science behind it, the actual science, the anthropology, the organ system studies, the comparative anatomy and physiology, the biological pathways, the metabolic pathways. They all line up. It's all very, very clear. We are absolutely carnivores by design of natural selection. What's next?
It's unsustainable.
Cover that. It's still sustainable. No matter how many times you say it's not sustainable, it still is. Unlike the vegan diet, which is not.
But we do see people do well on it because of the weight loss.
No, that's your speculation. We've covered that already. So repeating the same error again does not make it any more credible. It's still an error.
But of course, the long-term outcomes are very, very, very poor.
No, they're not. There is no data to inform on that whatsoever. None at all. You're making shit up to suit an ideology. You are not a scientist's asshole. You are a silly, ridiculous boy in short pants academically with no idea what you're talking about. TMAO, he said. TMAO, though. No, son. What's next?
The thing about the keto diet is we don't really know. We don't have long-term data.
Right, and we don't have long-term data on any diet whatsoever in terms of hard health outcomes. Goodness me. I think I'm going to go vegan. I think it's a great idea.
We all see.
That was it? I hope, well, I don't really hope she has more to say, but that was what you have to say? We don't know. Okay, good. That's probably the most accurate statement made by anybody in this video so far. And here we have another physician with no training in nutrition whatsoever, And clearly no idea about it either. Off you go, though, Barntard.
All of us doctors will see patients trying a ketogenic diet. And
what is a ketogenic diet? There are a whole bunch of different diets that will induce someone to produce ketones at various times. Some of those are completely contraindicated forms of nutrition intervention for a human being. Some of them are not.
Basically, the low carbohydrate diet that has gone through the Atkins phase, the South Beach phase, now it's the keto phase. It's the same thing. And
No, it isn't the same thing. There is a whole bunch of different diets being pushed by different people peddling different ideas. Some of those ideas are good. Mostly they're not.
Always happens is that people are very optimistic when they start it. They're hoping to lose a lot of weight because that's what's been promised. And some of them will lose weight. The ones who lose weight are the ones who kick out all the carbohydrates. And since that's about 50 or 60% of their diet, they're kind of starving their way thin.
No, they're doing no such thing. They're eating heartily and they're eating well if they're doing it correctly. False. And again, you know, talking about who might be starving, Neil, really? Is that where you want to go? That's the line you want to take, talking about others who might be starving? Okay, son.
And then after about 2 months or so, they get really tired of it, or their friends comment on their ketogenic breath.
I tell you what I'm really tired of. I'm really tired of listening to this absolute fucking nonsense from you criminal crackpots. Criminal crackpots. With your lies and your propaganda, your theological garbage.
Which is another part of sometimes they get really, I mean, heroically constipated.
No, we don't. False.
These are common problems.
No, they're not. You're talking about people who have changed their diet too rapidly from one thing to another, and as a result, they have upset their microbiome and their colonic function. And yes, those people can experience a problem. That's why you should get some sensible advice on changing your diet before you do it from someone who knows what they're talking about. I'm available for consults if people like. The link is in the show notes under this video. Click on it, click away, and book yourself in for a consult with me, and I'll tell you how to do it right so that we don't have to tear up your carnivore keto card and point at you and say you never did it properly anyway. Okay?
And in about 1 in 3, their cholesterols go through the roof.
So?
Because they're eating, in some cases, more meat than they were before.
So now you think that people's cholesterol goes up because they're eating meat, Neil? No. Goodness me. Doesn't even understand basic biochemistry at all.
But...
And also, you know, you said cholesterol goes up as if that's bad. It isn't, Neil. No.
There are a lot of patients who try it and nothing happens. They don't lose weight at all. And they wonder, why are they doing this?
Because they're doing it wrong, Neil.
And that's because they're avoiding all the healthy, starchy foods.
No, again, healthy, starchy foods is another oxymoron in exactly the same way that whole food, plant-based is an oxymoron. There is nothing healthy about starch in the diet. The exact requirement for starch in the human diet is not 1 single gram ever. Exactly the same as for sugar. Starch, by the way, is just sugar put together in chains. They're both contraindicated in the diet. Neither is necessary. Not 1 gram, not ever.
But they're making up for it with cheese and meat. Their calorie content doesn't...
Calories are heat, Neil. We've covered that already.
...drop at all. They don't lose an ounce. So no matter who they are, within a year, virtually all of them have given up on it.
False. That is simply untrue. I'll tell you who quits on what kind of diet, Neil. It's 84% of people who ever try vegan within 5 years. It's more than 50% in the first year for veganism, Neil. That's not true with ketogenic people. Certainly isn't true with carnivores, who are the actual paragon of ketogenic dieters, that we are the ones doing it right, Neil. Okay?
They're almost always heavier than they were before, and they're
false. That's just a lie. That's an absolute fucking lie, Barntard. Neil. It's just not true. You're incredible. Sitting there lying through your teeth. If in fact they are.
discouraged. And I have to tell you, if you follow these people over the longer term, their mortality is higher.
No, it isn't. False. Absolutely false. And even if it was, which it isn't, meaningfully, that's not a cause and effect relationship. Healthy user bias, Neil, is at play. Okay, we're done with that. There are no experiments on human lifespan available anywhere in the literature that can inform on any aspect of that. What's next?
A low-carb diet is an invitation to dying younger.
No, it isn't, Neil. Nonsense.
Because you're not giving your body the nutrition it needs.
Hang on. The exact dietary requirement for carbohydrates in human beings, Neil, is still 0. Not 1 gram ever. Ever. None. You liar. This is a demonstrable fact. You're done here. You are an evil misanthropist liar. Tell us about health, though.
So I encourage people, don't jump onto that fad.
Fad, yes, we've been doing it for, how long is it again? Oh, yes, 4.5 million years at least. All right, back to this clearly joyful, happy individual who is of an ideal weight range and is clearly skipping around with far too much energy because of her clearly healthy plant-based diet. Let's hear some more.
For plant-based diets, there's a growing amount of literature, and really literature actually that goes back a couple of decades. Showing that by adopting a predominantly plant-based diet, that you can have a dramatic improvement on your lipids.
No, there are no studies showing any such thing. And you don't even know what an improvement on lipids is, obviously, because you think lowered cholesterol is an improvement. It's not. Sorry about that. Facts again.
You can have a dramatic improvement on measures of inflammation.
You can also have the same thing by removing all the carbohydrates from your diet. The inflammation is a result of the Randall cycle, which is most strongly activated by mixing your macros in terms of fats and carbohydrates in the diet.
And also that you can really reduce your risk of having...
No, there's nothing to inform on risk still anywhere in the literature. That's still false.
A cardiovascular event.
No, not at all. False.
So there's a role both for primary prevention...
No, there isn't, because that's another cause and effect statement. It's still false.
As well as secondary prevention.
No, also false, because that's also a cause and effect statement.
Who have the disease, there might be opportunities to actually reverse.
That's the great thing about the word might, isn't it? It leaves the other thing on the table. Might not too.
The course, not just stabilize it. And when you take a step back, when you think about the medications that we have available to treat heart disease, most of them really just are able to keep things, best case scenarios.
Name me one medication that exists in the allopathic and pharmacological realms that cures anything. Shall we wait? It's not designed to cure anything. A patient cured is a customer lost for Big Pharma, the sponsors of the training of allopathic medicos. Also, the same people who basically largely own Big Agra outright. The same people who largely lobby and own government outright in most westernized nations, actually. They certainly own the Dietetics Association. Interesting stuff. If you actually go and do your homework on this, boys and girls, it'll blow your socks off.
Stable. They're not able to actually reverse where you are at that point in time.
And neither has any diet been shown to be able to do that either, cause and effect. There are no experiments that can underpin such a claim.
So it's really exciting to think about the possibilities that the diet alone can achieve.
Yeah, but there's no evidence that it can. Okay, so here's Cum Splatter, who is also not trained in nutrition at all. Clearly, because he thinks the solution to a disease which is characterized by elevated blood glucose, the way to deal with that is to pour ever more carbohydrates, which cause you to have an overplus of glucose. No, Cum Splatter. That's not the answer. That's ridiculous. Also, this is a boy that can't control his own A1C, let alone tell anybody else how to control theirs. But let's hear it, Cum Splatter, because it's always amusing from you.
We have many clients that come to the Mastering Diabetes program.
Yes, and so what? There are many people who will subscribe to all sorts of things and pay good money to be lied to by idiots like you, Cum Splatter. Another paragon of health, clearly.
Who have adopted a ketogenic diet for sometimes months, up to years. So they're eating...
They did it wrong, probably, Cum Splatter.
A low-carbohydrate diet because they've been told that carbohydrates are their enemy.
That's because they are, Cum Splatter. If you have a disease where you have an overplus of carbohydrate in your blood, toxic contraindicated carbohydrates, the last thing you should do is pour more of those down your neck, because your exact dietary requirement for those carbohydrates, Cum Splatter, is none. If you understood that, you might be able to get your own A1C down below 6. That's not a win, son. Okay, that's not good at all. You want your A1C 4.5 and below, ideally.
And the more carbohydrate they're going to eat, the more insulin they're going to need. So as a result of that, they're eating lots of meats, cheeses, fish, some dairy products, and they're using oils. And
there's the problem. There's the problem there. They did it wrong. Never, ever consume oils. Ever, boys and girls.
What they're able to do is actually maintain their blood glucose very flatline. So,
goodness me, that's tragic. You don't want that going on, do you, if your disease process is characterized by being unable to do that? Fuck me.
So from a blood glucose perspective, it gives them excellent control.
There you go.
The problem, though, is that over the course of time, they end up developing a whole host of side effects.
What are those, Cum Splatter?
And these side effects include high cholesterol.
That's not a problem. We've covered that.
Hypertension.
No. Not at all. 27 years.
They increase their base level of insulin resistance, which is the underlying...
Insulin resistance is a construct and a concept. It's not a physiological parameter. There is no piece of kit that can measure it. There is no company that makes an insulin resistance meter, Cum Splatter. Go and get a clue about what you're talking about. Any clue at all, and stop pouring carbohydrates down your neck.
Condition in diabetes. So they actually end up depositing more lipid or more fat inside of their muscle tissue and inside of their liver tissue.
So, if you base your diet on lipid, that's the storage form of energy. And having some available locally within some of your cells outside of your adipose tissue is not necessarily a bad thing.
A lot of these people have a difficult time thinking. They get sort of foggy brain.
Do they, Cum Splatter, have a problem thinking? Like people who, for example, can't understand that if you have a disease characterized and indeed diagnosed by having an overplus of glucose in the blood, that you should pour substances into your body exogenously, which will cause you to produce more and more glucose in your blood. That kind of thinking problem, Cum Splatter. Is that the kind you're talking about?
Brain, they get digestive problems.
No, they don't. No. False.
And they lose a ton of energy.
No. We've just seen some high energy presenters here on this very spiel from a bunch of people, none of whom are expert in nutrition. Haven't we?
So then we transition them to a plant-based diet that's especially low in fat. It's a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet.
Yeah, which is destitute in nutrition for human beings. Absolutely fucking destitute, Cum Splatter.
Right? And they see tremendous results.
No, they don't, Cum Splatter. You think tremendous results are getting your A1C down to 6. That's not a win, son. That's not an A1C that's under control. That tells us you do not have the knowledge to help anybody with their A1C. You can't control your own. You also express, that I know about, at least half a dozen very serious autoimmune dysfunctions, one of which will eventually kill you for sure. Through either direct result or sequelae from that. And I'm talking about your type 1 diabetes there. Okay? It is not normal or natural for a human being to have that many autoimmune dysfunctions. It's almost as if you've lived a lifestyle, cum splatter, that has led your body to rebel against the toxic load, the poisons, the non-food, the nonsense that you've done to your body. It's almost as if it's a judgment from on high, if there was such a thing. It's incredible. And yet you feel yourself remotely competent to tell others how to look after their A1C when you can't fucking look after your own. Wow. Dunning-Kruger much? Arrogance much? Criminal misanthropy much? Yeah, the last one, for sure.
The problem, or the thing that they go into this diet thinking is that, oh, if I eat a plant-based diet, especially if I'm eating carbohydrate-rich food, my blood glucose is going to skyrocket. It's going to go through
because it does.
The roof. But that doesn't actually happen.
It does, though, Cyrus. That's why your A1C is out of control, son.
And the reason it doesn't happen is because as they're eating more carbohydrate energy, they're eating less fatty acid energy.
And, you might get an improvement from where they were on a mixed diet, but you won't get all the way to health because 6 and above on your A1C is not a healthy A1C level, Cyrus. You will not make old bones with that. Okay? It's pretty straightforward.
Or less lipids. And as a result of that, their blood glucose stays nice and flat.
And also, you'll be destitute of nutrition because there are a whole bunch of required nutrients for human beings that you can only source from animal products, cum splatter.
And they still get all of these positive benefits, including improved digestion, reduced insulin resistance, reduced risk for cancer.
Insulin resistance is a concept. There are no studies informing on risk of cancer. That is a lie.
Heart disease.
No, same deal.
And they feel a ton better.
No. Right. So nothing of any value from cum splatter, as usual.
It's not an optimal diet for human health.
That's your opinion. Back it up.
We have not been used to eating a high-fat diet for decades or centuries.
Yes, we have. 4.5 million fucking years. Fact. Another MD. Another veganerized MD who is clearly a member of the Church of Anorexia Vegana if you look at what's written on the screen here. Saying we haven't been used to doing something that we absolutely have been used to doing for 4.5 million years is just criminal. There's no other way to describe that.
Whereas a plant-based diet has been eaten by the longest-lived population.
Nonsense. Absolute lie, again.
And the healthiest populations in the world.
No, that's a lie. There is no data to underpin that claim, extant anywhere.
And we know are associated with lower risks of chronic disease.
No, again with risk. There are no studies that inform on risk. That is a lie.
Which are now so prevalent in our society. So a plant-based diet essentially reduces the risk.
No, it doesn't. False. Still a lie.
Of heart disease.
No.
Cancer.
No.
Hypertension.
No.
Diabetes.
No.
The top killers in our current society.
Yes, that's true, but none of those can be informed on as to the risk of having any of those conditions through any aspect of human nutrition because there is no data to inform on that question. It does not exist still.
Whereas you really cannot say that about the ketogenic diet.
You really can't say it about any diet. I think I've been very clear on this topic.
we know that the ketogenic diet is meant to be one where you're eating predominantly fat, and so the body utilizes fat as their main source of energy.
As we have done for 4.5 million fucking years, yes.
This would be having a diet that's 70 to 80% rich in fat,
yes,
mainly from animal sources.
Yes, because that's the appropriate source for a human being.
So saturated fat.
Yes, which is the appropriate source for a human being. That's how we've evolved for 4.5 million fucking years.
And the saturated fat we know is associated with increased risk.
No. False. Lie.
Of heart disease.
No.
Diabetes.
No.
Cancer.
No.
And really, the only reason someone should be on a ketogenic diet
is because they are a human being, and that's the species-appropriate diet for a human being, with the caveat that the correct way to do ketogenic diet is by being 100% carnivore. What's next?
If they have intractable epilepsy.
Fucking nonsense. Absolute garbage.
In which most of the long-term studies have been conducted. So children with epilepsy do show some benefit from a ketogenic diet.
So does everybody else.
But the side effects are vast.
No, they fucking aren't. There are no side effects.
Include upset of the stomach.
No, we've covered this. No.
So diarrhea or diabetes.
No.
Fatigue.
No.
Problems with energy.
No.
Pancreatitis.
No.
Which is inflammation of the pancreas. Kidney stones.
No, they come from plants, remember? Oxalate.
Which are highly prevalent in the children that are taking a ketogenic diet.
That's because of the medications that they were on, love. Go and do more than 5 seconds of research and you'll understand this. Look at the pharmacology of the anti-epileptic drugs they were being given.
And in the long term, ketogenic diets or high-fat diets have been associated with increased risk of...
No, they haven't, with increased risk of anything. No.
Dying.
No.
In addition to increased risk of heart disease.
No, false.
As well.
No. Lies. All fucking lies. Complete incompetent lies from a charlatan. False. Jesus is a never-ending fucking shitstorm of liars, incompetence, and clearly healthy paragons of information about diet and stuff, aren't they? All of them. Who's next?
When anyone asks me about low-carb eating, I am inclined to point out the obvious, which is...
Are you? What's that?
Fiber. That's a
fiber. You though fiber. Okay. Well, the exact requirement for fiber in human nutrition is none ever. Not 1 gram. You don't require fiber.
Carbohydrate. You want to eat lots of fibers.
No, you don't need any carbohydrates or fiber. Those are the 2 things that you say are important and vital. Neither one is. You don't need a single gram of either one of those things ever. Fact. We're done.
A low-carb diet is not going to be the most healthy.
Okay. Another registered dietitian. So another indoctrinated buffoon.
And in fact, there was a study that came out recently.
Oh, in fact, there was a study, was there? Let's hear about it.
Very recently that showed low-carb dieting is actually unhealthy.
No, there's no study that shows any such thing. That is a lie. That is just a complete bull-faced lie. There are no studies showing anything of the sort.
Unhealthy in terms of life expectancy?
No. There are no studies that inform on life expectancy. None at all.
Also unhealthy in terms of disease, the diseases you might get like heart disease and diabetes.
No, we've covered that. False.
So we definitely don't want to talk about low carb eating. We want to eat lots of carbs.
No, we don't want to do any such thing. No.
Good carbs. We want to eat fruits, vegetables, beans.
There are no such thing as good carbs. No.
Grains. That is the healthiest diet.
No, it isn't. False.
We reaffirm that with studies over and over.
No, you don't. There are no studies that inform on any such thing. False.
And emphasis on reaffirming, but affirming what we already...
Emphasis on repeating the same lie so many times that people start to believe it. That's all, because there is no science underpinning your claim. None at all. Zero.
No. Eating carbs, good carbs.
There are no good carbs. I've covered that.
is a great idea.
No, it isn't. False.
So a plant-based diet is better than a keto diet because
No, it isn't. No.
it gives people all those outcomes that they really wanted from
Again, outcomes, that's a cause and effect statement. Do you have any experiments? No.
keto diet, which is usually things like weight loss and lower blood sugar, but it also promotes long-term health. So it includes...
No, it doesn't. Why do 84% of people who ever try vegan quit within 5 years and cite catastrophic health failure as the reason they quit the diet? Explain that. How does that fit into what you've just said?
Foods that will reduce the risk of things like breast cancer and colon cancer and heart disease and stroke. I mean, if you lose weight but you have a heart attack, you haven't gained anything. So a plant-based diet gives people all those short-term outcomes that they want, and also gives them immense long-term.
No.
The reality is that we've been on this high protein, low carbohydrate craze.
Tell us about the reality. Whoever the fuck you are.
For years now. Yet no one has stopped to analyze how these diets differ from what we've been offered before. It's like we're getting sold the same thing over and over again, and someone's just putting a sticker over it with another name, a new fad, a new trend. It's all...
Right. So no credentials of any kind listed here. Not even an inappropriate credential. Fuck me, really? Klaus, son, wakey wakey.
All the same thing. High animal protein, low carbohydrates. People say low carbohydrates like it's a good thing. Essentially, what we should be eating is more carbohydrates and less protein. But that flips this entire fad on its head. But
fad. Yeah, I've covered that. 4.5 million years. Sorry, I've just had a coughing fit because of the tree pollen situation here. At this time of the year, it's quite extreme here on the farm. Again, another example of how plants are not our friends.
the reality is that the proof lies in the clinical trials. The proof lies in the...
There are no clinical trials. There is no proof. You are lying.
Data.
There is no data. It does not exist.
The numbers don't lie.
There are no numbers. You suggesting that there are is what the lie is, sunshine. There's where the lie is.
Right? We know that heart disease is still killing us. It's still...
Yes, but that's got nothing to do, cause and effect, with any aspect of human nutrition. We don't have data to inform on that.
The number one killer, and we know that we know we have the cure to heart disease. We have...
No, you don't have any such thing. If you did, heart disease would be a thing of the past. It isn't. Buffhead.
The ability to eradicate heart disease with a...
Well, why hasn't that been done then?
Plant-based diet.
No. False. There is no data to underpin that claim, that a plant-based diet can have any effect on heart disease. No.
It's the only diet in the world that has been proven.
It hasn't, you liar. Well, you're probably not so much a liar. You're probably just utterly incompetent, like everybody else that's spoken on this video so far. No.
To prevent, arrest, and reverse heart disease.
No, it hasn't been shown to do any such thing. That is a complete lie. There is no evidence for that claim anywhere. So there you go. That's quite enough of plant-based news for one day. And then some, isn't it? Goodness me. Absolute rancid, pustulous, excremental nonsense. Lies, propaganda, spin doctrine. Look over there, shiny thing. Claiming with authority that a bunch of evidence and proof exists for something that it doesn't. Claiming that a bunch of things are so that are not so. Just absolutely misanthropic, criminal behavior from start to finish. Klaus, you should be in prison, son, as should every single speaker on this channel, this plant-based news channel. Every single one of you should be imprisoned. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. You will be judged in this life or the next. Join me next time, boys and girls, when someone else will be wrong on the interwebs. I'm recording a whole bunch of these in one session, so yeah, it's a big day of recording. So see you in a few minutes my time. We will be dealing with probably, I think we'll do Milty McMilty Pants next, because this one's great. Yeah. You won't see me until tomorrow, though, so enjoy the outro music until then. See you, boys and girls.